Yeah.
That's
It's a good
interesting.
question.
So
Good
it ebbs
question.
and flows. So when you search on Amazon, like before that traction book would come up, but because your book is better, I don't know. I didn't read the other book.
Yeah.
Yours is going to come up first
It will
now.
eventually. Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so let's dive into what's a bullseye and like why do people care?
So back up. One thing I noticed from all these interviews and the framework for the book was that all these companies were getting traction through different ways. And you can think of them as marketing channels, user acquisition channels. So like you're familiar with some like Facebook ads or Google ads or billboards, right? We identified literally 19 of these. And it's essentially the universe of things you can do to get traction. Um, the problem is there's generally one that makes you take off in any growth stage of your company. And the bullseye is like, okay, you're shooting a bullseye to get an arrow to get customers and aiming at that one channel that's going to get you to take off. And the analogy I like is because most people are shooting kind of blindfolded. They just they're totally biased, almost through no fault of their own, about what to try based on just what they've heard about. So most people try some Google ads, try some Facebook ads.
Yep.
They hardly ever try a billboard, for example, or other ones that no one thinks about, like going to doing speaking engagements yourself or starting a podcast, as an example. And so the thought of Bullseye was try to get a framework where you can look and think about all the 19 channels and figure out which one you really should be using and overcome your bias.
I love that. I talk about this too. I call it shotgun marketing because I see people like just sort of going, I'm going to do this and then not measure anything and go, why didn't anything work? Right? All right. So walk us through what somebody should do.
Right. Okay. So the framework is really kind of simple to apply, which in some sense would be like, oh, that's simple. In another sense, would be like, that's too simple. But it actually works. So,
simple, but nobody follows it, right?
yeah, right. Kind of what you're saying on shotgun. So the first step is you literally brainstorm all these channels, and that's kind of the starting point. Key is that most people don't take all the channels seriously, but that means they might be missing out on the one that works, and even more likely because usually the ones that work are the underutilized ones in your space, so they're not the ones that you're thinking about or your friends are talking about. So you got to go through this brainstorming step to really get ideas for how you might use each one, and the ideas from our perspective should be like a cheap test to run. So if it's speaking engagement, it's like, go to a local meetup or event and try to speak there and see what happens. If it's Facebook ads, it might be running, $1,000 worth, not, 50 ads, 10,000. And so you write down all these tests, and then you go and you prioritize the tests, and you try to narrow it down to 3 things to do, which are your most exciting tests. This is kind of the ranking prioritizing step. And in the ranking prioritize, how you do that is you've guesstimated, okay, how much will it cost to acquire customers in this channel? Do I think they're the right customers? And how much volume could it achieve if I could try to scale it? And then you go run the tests. And we advocate to run them in parallel, not do serial stuff, because you can do a few in parallel and it gets you quicker. And then assuming one takes off, you focus. And so this is the opposite of, this is where I think where people get confused is it's not a shotgun at the beginning, but you are doing a few things at once to try to figure out what works by testing. But once you find something that works, you got to drop everything else and focus on that one and then run a market fit piece. Now, there's one caveat here, not caveat, but one thing I'd like to point out is that I meet a lot of people in the early stages who don't want to spend any money because they're like, so they navigate to just free channels.
Yeah. I'm going to start a blog and I'm going to do a podcast.
Yeah, I'm going to do SEO because it seems free. I don't want to put any money on. And the problem with that is the paid channels may be the right channels,